seat. Thank you, worship team. Really quick, I had one thing brought to my attention while we were playing the game. Everybody can turn around and look at Kara. I know, because I know what's coming. This is Kara. If you don't know Kara, turn the sound. She just made. Thank you. She just made the Christian Leader, which is kind of our church's denominational magazine. She has a quote in there about senior high camp this last summer. So very cool. So very briefly, since you made the paper, you can tell us about it. Yes. What do you remember about camp? What stood out to you? We've talked about doing it again this year. Why should they, even it's September and that's not coming up until June, but why should they look forward to camp? What was so great about it?
Okay, so the quote that they put in there was the most impactful thing that the most impactful thing that I learned at Ascent was the importance of being bold in your faith and following God, even if you are sacrificing everything. That's what I said. I don't know. That's what I said. But anyways, I thought it was so fun. They had so many activities. It was great. People were great. Everyone was great. Worship was great. Everything was great. Y'all should come this year.
We take 13. I think we took 13 this year, and we were even talking about it at our table. We're going to take double that this next year. So if you are a high school student, put June on your calendar because we're going back to New Mexico. It's going to be a ton of fun. All right.
Or if you're an 8th grader.
Or if you are an 8th grader getting ready to go into high school. So anybody incoming high school to incoming freshman to outgoing senior, Ascent 2023 will be for you. And man, it is a blast. As somebody who's done lots of camps, that was one of the most fun I've ever been to. So absolutely worth going. All right. So let's talk very briefly. I want to talk about that marshmallow game that we played. So, as you were building, what worked and what didn't? Just somebody shout out, yeah, Patrick.
We built a triangle pyramid.
Yeah.
And we made it very secure by putting multiple thingies.
Okay.
And then it tippled over because of music, I think.
Okay.
That's what John said.
Yeah.
The music is too loud.
Thank you. They built. So if you couldn't hear, we built a pyramid with multiple thingies. That's a technical building term you guys probably don't understand, but they had multiple thingies attached to it to help keep it upright. You two gentlemen, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Teamwork makes the dream work. People worked. Excellent. Glad to hear. So as you guys started to build, did your first design work?
No. Yes.
And then we broke it.
Okay, how many of us would say the first design worked? Okay. How many of us needed 2 designs? How many needed 3 designs, 4, 5, right? So this is actually, it's actually quite a scientific, it's a scientific experiment that lots of people have done. They've really done this study with millions of people worldwide, trying to see how they respond to the problem of needing to build the tall freestanding structure with the single marshmallow on top. Everybody gets the exact same supplies. Everybody, the millions of people that have done this all got the same 25 pieces of spaghetti, 3 feet of tape, and 1 marshmallow. They didn't get marshmallows thrown at them. You're welcome. That was me improvising. Now, if I were to tell you that the best group and the worst group that they have given this job to, your choices are kindergartners and people who have their master's degrees or higher. Who do you think is the best group and who do you think is the worst group? Who thinks the kindergartners are the best?
They have more experience.
Who thinks the kindergartners would be the worst then? By far and away. It's not even close. Kindergartners are by far the best people on this project. Now, the reason may surprise you, because one of the things, if you've got younger brothers or sisters, you spend time around younger people, particularly those our kids like to play with Legos, right? They build something, and they see what works and doesn't work, and they take it apart, and then they try to build again. And it's that repeated activity of building and destroying and rebuilding and seeing what works and doesn't work, and trying again in the midst of failure that really proves that kindergartners aren't, it's not even close how much better they are than people who have their master's degree. The people who have their degrees and think that they can plan all this out, spend the first 19 minutes trying to come up with a brilliant plan and then get one take in the last 60 seconds, and it just doesn't work. Yes, sir. No charming type.
We should have had the kindergartners build these buildings.
We should have. We didn't. The point, kind of the larger point of the whole game when it's played in front of lots of people is there is something inherently special about us trying and practicing and failing and needing to overcome. And in the midst of those setbacks and those failures, it's really those moments and those gaps where we begin to learn. I want to take a slightly different take on that tonight. As you guys have heard every week since we started, we are starting in Genesis with the creation, and we are going right on through to Jesus in December. And so we are finding ourselves this week still in the book of Genesis, but 2 weeks ago was Genesis 1 and 2. Last week was Genesis 3. So Genesis 1 and 2, the creation of the world, God made everything perfect. Genesis 3 is the fall. People destroyed it, right? We wanted ourselves kind of front and center, and we ruined God's perfect plan. And then I said one of the things we're going to start to look at is how God starts to try to put all this back together. That if we flip to the end of the Bible and we read Revelation, we see that God is trying to restore everything back to his perfect creation. And so what is his plan to get us there? So tonight we're going to spend just a few minutes as we end tonight in the book of Genesis, chapter 11. And we're going to talk about the Tower of Babel. So let me read it for you. Now the whole world had one language and one common speech. Everybody spoke the same language. You could talk to anybody in the world because we all just knew the same language. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar, and they settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that they were building, and the Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why the place is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Now, there are a couple of takeaways I want us to focus on tonight. Number one, this is, if you're familiar with the early parts of Genesis, this comes after Noah and the flood. This is actually about his grandkids. And so if we were to go back and read Genesis 8, 9, 10, we see that Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. These are like Shem's children. So Noah's grandkids are starting to build and to settle. They want to create a city for themselves. And these are people, eventually that kind of linguistically we would call them Semites. It's a group of people, much like we might identify ourselves as Americans. They're going to be called Semites, and eventually their descendants will become the Jewish people. So we're kind of in this space between the earth is beginning to be filled with people, but we're not quite to the Jewish people yet. We're going to get to Abraham's story here actually in 2 weeks, because next week is the talent show. So in 2 weeks we're gonna hear from the story of Abraham and what it means for God to call people. But just know that God is beginning to travel through this line of what it means to follow him. Yes, sir, you have a question?
Whenever God confused the languages, like a certain group of people speak this language and another.
Yes, it would be like trying to talk to a Canadian. You just can't do it. Right? Hey? Glad you caught that. So we're going to begin to trace this family line of people who will call themselves the people of God. And we're starting here intentionally in Babel because we have to see where this disconnect continues. Now, one of the other important things we need to remember, if you were to open your Bible and read this, there's probably a little section heading at the top of it called the Tower of Babel. Now, tower is a great word, it's a fine word, but it makes us maybe think of something similar like we were building tonight, or we think of something like the Eiffel Tower. Really, ancient towers, a better word for them, we're going to use the word, we'll see if you've heard of it before. How many of you have heard of something called a ziggurat? Anybody heard that word before? A few of us? Okay. Yeah, so how many of us have heard of, how many of us have studied like Greek mythology or ancient Greece culture and heard of like temples? Have we heard of temples? A few more of us? Okay, great. So ziggurats are really temples before they made temples. So temples in ancient Greece were usually built of stone, of marble, something like that. They had the columns, right? We're kind of familiar with what they look like. Ziggurats, as we see here in Genesis chapter 11, are just a bunch of bricks stacked together that people could walk up the sides of the bricks, and it was essentially a tower made of bricks. And so think of this, there's this massive plain, there's this big open area, and people begin to make bricks and start to stack them on top of each other so that they can build this huge elevated platform where they could worship. And that by itself is not that unusual. In the ancient world, and in that time, people all over the world were building ziggurats to worship whatever god it is that they followed. So if we fast forward a few hundred years, the Jewish people, they're doing the same sort of thing, right? They're building places where they say, this is where we encounter God, this is where we experience God. And so they're creating a place to say, I met God here. A lot of us end up getting those same sorts of experiences. Maybe you've been to a camp where you were like, man, God really spoke to me at that camp, right? And that camp always kind of carries that significant place or that moment in our heart, and we're excited to go back. I've been to Hume one year, and I really felt like God spoke to me, and I can't wait to go back to Hume again next year. Right? So that's really what they're doing. They're creating these places where they're trying to encounter God. But one interesting thing happens here, and this is really what gets them in trouble. Instead of building a church, instead of a place where they go to worship God, right? They have the story of Noah. This is Noah's grandkids. They have heard the story of the flood. Their parents lived through it. Their grandfather was the one who built the ark and really kind of got humanity through the flood. So these are people that should have known what God was up to. It was part of their story. God wasn't some far off distant thing. He had been near to them. He had saved them. He had brought them through the flood. They had experienced it. And yet what the text tells us is that they were building this ziggurat, this tower, not to honor God, not to connect with God, not to worship God, but the text says they were doing it to praise themselves. The text says, let's go build something so that everybody knows just how great we are. Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they use bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. They are hearing these bricks together with, at that time, cutting-edge technology. It was not meant to go anywhere. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we can make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the whole earth. The entire point of the Tower of Babel, the thing where they go wrong, is that they want everybody to look at their tower and praise their work. They are trying, just like we saw last week in the Garden of Eden, where Satan comes along and tempts them to say, take your eyes off of God and put them onto you. The Tower of Babel is the exact same story happening. These are a group of people who are saying, I want to be praised. I want to be the good one. I want everybody to look at me. Would you please just acknowledge how good I am? Stop worrying about God and put your eyes on me. They really try to convince everyone in this city just how great they are. These people, and we trace their family line, these are the people of God, decided to build a temple to honor themselves. It's a pretty audacious claim, right? That's pretty bold of them. These are the people of God saying, yeah, we don't really care what God has to say. We don't care what God thinks. We are just in it for ourselves. I mean, imagine if instead of the spaghetti and marshmallows like you had tonight, if next week you guys show up for the talent show and I said, hey guys, we're not going to have the talent show. Talent show is canceled. Instead, I have some bricks and some iron beams and some screws and some drywall, and we're going to go into the junior high green space, and you guys are going to build a tower at the junior high lawn for a statue of me.
Yes.
No, you don't want that, right? As soon as you guys are coming here, like, hey, I want to come. I like going to the youth group. It's a place where I feel safe. It's a place where I feel honored. It's a place where I hear God talking to me, and as soon as I stand up and say, hey guys, let's make a youth group about me, we have completely missed the point of why we gather. And that's really what they're doing here. They were completely willing to forget God's faithfulness and build churches that worship themselves. And I wish we could say the story ends there. I mean, it's bad enough, right? Can we just wrap it up? But the text doesn't do that. God obviously doesn't like that plan. He's not okay with us building churches to honor ourselves. That is something that He reserves the right alone to do. He alone is holy. He alone is God. He alone is sinless and perfect. He alone has created the world. And so God makes very clear we can't both love and follow Him and want to do our own thing. That when we choose to be a part of the people of God, when we choose to be a part of the family of God, we tell you guys every week that this is family. You belong here, you belong to this group, but most importantly, we want you to know that you belong to God. And that means that when God becomes first in your life, that everything else has to take a back seat to it. So God intervenes and He shuts down their building project. He confuses the language so they can no longer communicate. And since they can't finish the tower, they all just begin to scatter. And everybody goes their own way. And God's going to take a very select group out of that and start to create the people of God, so that through that story, through those people, through that coming message, God can say, this is what a true life of worship looks like. So, a couple of quick points in closing. Number one, we probably need to acknowledge that we do that exact same thing all the time. If we're honest, we're probably not any less arrogant than those people. How many of us like to be praised for our skill? We're smart and we want to make sure that everyone knows it. We're really good on the basketball court, the golf course, the soccer pitch, the football field, the volleyball court, performing on stage, whatever it is, and we want people to compliment us. We want the lead role. We want the spotlight to be on us. And then we want the praise of people. We want the attention. We want the glory. We want everyone to know that we are the best. I have, I'll admit, done that not just in my own life. I have, rather embarrassingly, passed that on to my kids multiple times. I have, and Hayani could vouch for this. I have told them second place is first place loser. You must be the best, right? We like to push those messages. You stand on top of the podium and don't bother getting up there. Oh, we're almost done. Hold on. We want everyone to know that we are the best, and we carry with us the same attitude that was displayed at the Tower of Babel. What do we need to do to get praise from other people so that they know that we are better than they are? Contrast that with what the Bible really wants us to say is, yeah, you know what? I do have some pretty good skills. I guess you're right. I'm just thankful that God gave those to me. Right? When people praise us, do we like to absorb that and use it to build ourselves up, or do we like to redirect it and say, yeah, you think I'm good, but look what God has done in my life? You think I've accomplished something, can I tell you about Jesus? Do you think this is anything of significance? This is a tower that in a few years will be torn down, but God has been speaking for thousands of years. Can I tell you about it? So number one, in those moments where we experience that praise, our hearts tell us where we're really at in connection with God and others. The greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is like it, to love our neighbors. When we get that praise, are we still willing to be loving to God first and others second, or do we like to absorb that and make sure that everybody knows, hey, did you hear they praised me, how good I am? Number two, I think one of the things we miss in this story, we'll use this as we wrap up tonight. We don't have to go to God. He comes to us. See, building these towers, building these ziggurats, building these temples is a very common experience. And it's a place, it's our attempt as people to say, can we create a place where we know that we can experience God? Can we create a place where we can all gather and know that God is there? It's part of the security mechanism that we all like to have. I know that I can go to church and God's there. Guess what? God is with you everywhere. We don't have to build a tower. We don't have to go to someplace special. We don't have to get on top of a mountain. We don't have to carve a hole in the side of a hill somewhere. We don't have to bake bricks and tie them together with tar and mortar. We can just be in the presence of God. The people wanted to build the tower and go up to where God was. That was their attempt. They wanted to climb up to where God was and then put themselves in his place. They wanted to be like God, which was the exact same temptation that we saw last week in the Garden of Eden. But, and this is the good news as we wrap up tonight, we don't have to go up to God. He comes down to us. One of the things that we are continually going to see week in and week out as we journey through the Old Testament, as we get ready for Jesus in December, the ultimate gift that God gives us, we don't have to go anywhere to find God. We can stop right here, right now, right where we are at, and experience God. One of the things that will transform Moses' life in a few weeks when we study it is Moses is tending sheep in the desert, just like he does every day, making sure they have enough food and water. And he sees this bush that's on fire, and he approaches it, and from this burning bush, he hears a voice that says, Moses, stop, the place you're standing is holy ground. God was right there. In the midst of Moses' daily activities and the things that Moses was always doing, God was present in his life, and the same is true for you. You don't have to go someplace fancy. We'd love for you to join us at winter camp. We'd love for you to join us at summer camp. We'd love for you to continue to come to youth group every single week. We think it's a great place for you to be, but know that you don't have to wait for the next youth group to experience God. You can have that day in and day out every single day, because God is with us. You don't have to build a tower. You don't have to get a bunch of friends together. You don't have to do anything fancy. You can just stop and say, God, I'm here. First thing when you wake up, God, I'm listening. Would you speak to me? God, I'm getting ready to go to a test. I need to say sorry to my friend. I have to reconcile with this person. I need to say sorry to my mom because I said something I shouldn't have. God, would you be with me in that moment? And he is, because that's the kind of God we serve. He comes to earth. He comes to us. He loves us. It is his work in this world that makes us his people. And I think that's good news. There is nothing we have to do, because there is nothing we can do. God has done it all, and for that we need to be thankful. So this week, take with us that message. Don't build those towers of praises for yourself. Use those gifts and those moments as opportunities to show others what God has done in your life. Let's pray. God, thank you for these kids. Thank you for this time. Thank you for this space and the music and the games and the fun and the marshmallows and the food, God, and just all the ways in which we are cared for and provided for. Thank you. Thank you for all of it. God, sometimes we want to confess that we like that praise. We seek that praise. We go out of our way to acquire that praise. We are building our own little Tower of Babel moments in our lives, and we are seeking from other people the praise and the validation that only comes from you, God. That as we have seen over the last couple of weeks, we are people created in your image, God, and so as your image bearers, as your light in this world, God, our relationship and our understanding to you is what we need to know. And so help us to seek that affirmation and that comfort and that identity in you in a world that wants to distract us, God. As we saw last week, the world will do anything to distract us from having that connection with you. And so we just want to stop and say, God, we choose to follow you in all things. Help us not to build towers that honor ourselves, but towers in our lives that honor and glorify you. Help us to be people that seek you, that praise you, and that point to you in all things. Keep us safe this week. Be with these kids, whatever they have coming at them this week, whatever they are going to face. God, would you be with them and guide them and protect them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.